Okay, and then even if I remembered some of the students, I try to send a file, but I can't. Uh, if it is the best case, is just send me email about the exam paper. So I'll reply to your email with your files. Okay, we'll back to chapter 11. So again, chapter 11 is we would like to extend into we would like to deal with this aggregate demand and supply, in particular aggregate demand from ISLM case. So actual application will be covered in chapter 12. So in chapter 11, our purpose is to understand this ISLM model. And then in the end of this ISLM model, maybe we'll try to connect with the aggregate demand. And then we'll talk about some monetary and fiscal policy too. So last time that we talked about this Keynesian course. Again, this ISLM model is actually postulated by John Hicks. And then he was a student of under Keynes. And then at the beginning, several times I emphasized there is a fundamentally different approach toward the operation of the macroeconomy in terms of Keynesian economics and the classical economics. And we start with some additional or another approach of Keynesian toward the goods market. And then we covered this idea with Keynesian cross. And then simple idea is they would like to distinguish between planned expenditure and the actual expenditure. And then their operation will be adjusted by this unplanned inventory investment. That means if you remind, the one of the component of GDP identity is investment. And another detailed component of investment is inventory investment. That means when you talk about this investment in the principal class, sometimes it is very weird because in general, in case of the general understanding, inventory means looks like the something not sold. So that's why how can you assign or how can you categorize this something not sold as inventory investment? But in this case, same thing. This is looks like a reserve, and then based on this level of inventory, they would like to respond or they would like to adjust the mismatch between planned expenditure and actual expenditure. And then we have a very simple relationship because in the system of Keynesian cross, investment is just a fixed exogenous. In other words, in this case, we have only one endogenous variable, y, and then this y is looks like just a determinant of this consumption. That means in terms of this slope of a consumption function, we'll have a specific slope of your planned expenditure. And then all other variable, then this consumption will be exogenous. After that, we'll have the equilibrium or disequilibrium or operation of this actual equilibrium, actual expenditure and planned expenditure. So we'll have a 45-degree line, and then another the positive slope with a positive intercept again. Since it is based on consumption function, that means regardless of your income, sometimes, not sometimes, always, we have to spend some autonomous expenditure. That's why we'll have a positive slope, a positive intercept. Since we have two different slopes, we can just mathematically we can understand we'll have the converge into equilibrium point. At the time, this mismatch will be labeled by unplanned inventory investment. So this is operation. After that, we would like to capture what happened to our new equilibrium point. Again, basic economics approach means at the beginning, we would like to set up the model and then try to find the equilibrium condition. And based on your equilibrium condition, we'll find the equilibrium point. After that, we just find the additional equilibrium point or new equilibrium point. That means when you have some shock to your model or something happens outside your model. That means usual case, we cannot control inside your model some variable. That means that we cannot control some variables inside your model. That's why it will shift your operation of your model, and then we'll achieve or we'll recover additional equilibrium. That means maybe many of you already knew. Actually, we call it this type of approach is comparative statistics. In other words, we would like to compare equilibrium points. And then that means in this case, during this process, from, for example, if we take the upper level of a class, then just the intermediate level, we would like to more focus on what is the process of dynamics from A to B. But in this case, we just simply, we have some shift in the planned expenditure by increasing government expenditure, and then we'll have a B, and then from this A to B, we'll have a higher outcome or income, something like that. And then this change will be associated with this, looks like the MPC. That means in terms of a marginal propensity to consume, we'll follow some infinite geometry series of this MPC change. That means we can measure what is the relationship between the change in government purchase and your national income or our output. That's why we can label this is a multiplier. In other words, this process is now explained by multiplier effect. In other words, in this case, we are looking to this process more details. That means it is a little bit, we would like to find the dynamics with some differential equations. But since our class is a little bit lower level than that differential equation, maybe we just compare with a very limited process approach. That means A to B will have some change. It will be covered by this change in your MPC or some looks like a feedback effect. In this case, we can say feedback effect. Now, and then after that, the same fashion, when you have a tax, we have a tax multiplier. Process will be almost the same, except their original operation rule. In other words, in this case, our starting point was initiation. Our process was initiated by changing your tax. That means you can say tax multiplier. So if you compare government purchase and tax, the fundamental difference is in terms of this GDP identity or planned expenditure, our planned expenditure will have a one-to-one relationship with the government purchase because this is a separated the term. But our tax looks like there is an intermediate term, consumption. That means it is associated with your marginal propensity to consume because the slope of consumption function is marginal propensity to consume, MPC. That means it looks like we have an indirect effect. And then we have this different sign, negative sign. So technically, so we'll have a slightly different tax multiplier. But first of all, their denominator will be same because their channel or this process will be intermediated by the consumption change. But initial starting points are slightly different because tax was just one component of disposable income. But again, government expenditure is just a separated item, the one-to-one relationship with your planned expenditure. This is just the minor difference. After that, we derived how to make this IS curve. In other words, in this case, we would like to find many different levels of equilibriums in the goods market. In other words, after having this change, or if we change some other point, that means this is also a point on the IS curve. And then if you, for example, lower, you will have another point here. And another line, you will have another point. So that's why conceptually you can find all of the points on the IS curve or IS relation. That's why I prefer ISO relation instead of, even if they are, it is exactly the curve, but actually it was from the operation of this Keynesian cross, and then we just make coordination or the coordinate to or correspond point based on this intersection. That means all of the points are equilibrium points. So don't forget. After that, we'll find the relationship between real interest rate and output. We'll have a negative slope. That's why it looks like a demand curve. But as you know, this is not the actual demand curve because this is looks like it is the aggregate market, not just the individual, the commodity or service market. That's why not just the price and the quantity relationship, even if it looks like the negative slope. And then we talked about what is the effect of this fiscal policy. And then first of all, it is the same as change in t is less than 0. That means expansionary policy or this case a tax cut, they are the same meaning. That means we have the fiscal policy. Only difference is in this case, their size of change or the effect of this change will be controlled by their multipliers. So again, previously, as you show, we have two different multipliers in this case, government expenditure and tax multiplier. This size will be different. But other than this part, they are all the same. So in this case, last time there is a typo. Actually, we have this case is not tax cut. The increase in tax. That means we have a decrease in your outcome. Okay, now and then after that, I explained another theory of the Keynesian theory for money market. That means, again, if you remind classical economics, the role of a money market for classical economics looks like secondary. In other words, they just treat the money as looks like a medium of exchange. That means they just confine their role as only the secondary part for the operation of economy. But Keynes will have a totally different idea. In particular, first of all, if you check this theory of liquidity preference, first motive is almost the same, just the transaction, but in particular, the last part, speculative motive. That means they would like to hold their money for investment. Or in the middle, they would like to hold the money for precautionary motive. That means they would like to countermeasure for uncertainty. That means your asset or money would be, fundamental difference is your money will be additional asset. But again, the classical economics, they just think this money is just a medium of exchange. That means their rule looks like just a fractional, or so we call it in economics, we call it the instrumental. That means their purpose is not for holding just the money. This is just looks like just for process or just for transaction. So since they have a totally different approach toward this money market, so they will have a slightly specific impact on the operation of this ISLM model. But Hicks, he would like to combine these two different schools' ideas together. So first of all, this money supply is fixed, and that this price is also fixed because we assume that we have a short-run case. That's why price is fixed. After that, they also utilize the idea of Fisher equation. In other words, the quantity theory of money. And then we have a nominal interest rate is composed of two parts. Real interest rate, as you know, this real interest rate looks like the adjustment variable for loanable fund market under the classical economics. And then they also provide the inflation or expected inflation. And then since the real interest rate will be determined by loanable funds market under the classical economics, at the time they emphasize the relationship between, in particular for Fisher equation, relationship between this nominal interest rate and inflation. But in this case, since it is a short run, and then for simplicity, they would like what is it, Professor Higgs, he would like to ignore this effect of expected inflation. Again, it will be relaxed in chapter 12, and then we'll have the relationship, one-to-one relationship between nominal and real interest rate. In other words, maybe we can just ignore difference between nominal and real, and then since we have this the corresponding relationship, so we'll utilize or we'll exercise or employ this idea into combination of two different models. That means when you combine this IS and LM together, technical problem or the mathematical problem is our vertical axis could be different. One of them is a nominal interest rate, the other is a real interest rate. If it is, we cannot draw two lines together technically, but after having this additional assumption or simplicity assumption, now technically we can draw two lines together. And then another one is, under the theory of liquidity preference by Keynes, he would like to think again, money is an additional financial asset. And then existing financial, there is a market for this financial asset will be money market and bond market together. That's why for Keynes, he would like to consider two different operations. And then bond market is also controlled by demand and supply, but this is a bond. And then this is the price of a bond and supply. And then in this case, money supply, increasing money supply means, for example, in our textbook, he just explained, they would like to search for or they will be looking for additional chance of earning extra money to invest some interest bearing deposit, or they would like to buy bond. But actually in the tradition of Keynes, they would like to more focus on the bonds, because the bond price and interest rate, they will be opposite direction. Price of bond is increasing and interest rate goes down. In other words, when they have some excess supply of money, they would like to spend this extra money to buy bond. Here, the price of the demand will be shifted, and then price goes up. And then again, the relationship between this price bond and nominal interest rate will be opposite. It's inverse. That's why we'll have a lower the interest rate. Or we can take the additional explanation. In other words, since they would like to now find the additional chance of investing their money for this interest-bearing bank deposit, and then we'll turn to the behavior of the banker. That means they feel there are a lot of demand. That's why they would like to offer lower interest rate, to make this deal. And then because there are the excess supply, excess demand, that means they can make a lower interest rate. Either way, we'll have when you have the higher money supply, it will lower our interest rate. So that's why we'll have we can imagine what we can expect. There is a relationship between the operation of money market. Now today we'll turn to how to derive LM. Again, when you draw the IS curve, IS curve depends on the real interest rate and output plane. And then we have this downward sloping of IS relation or IS curve. It was from Keynesian cross, technically. And then it means it is about goods market. So we have to think about big picture. And then we'll derive this LM curve. LM curve will have real interest rate and real money balance. Now, this is a money market. Then as you expect, when you say about ISLM model, or when you drive, or when you create, or when you draw IS and LM model together, in other words, we would like to combine, or we would like to deal with two different markets together. Now, goods market and money market together. And then again, IS model, by definition, all of points on the line, they are all equilibrium point in the goods market. LM, the point on the LM curve is the same meaning. That means all of points are equilibrium points in the money market. And then after having the two lines together, we'll have another equilibrium point. That means we have an additional equilibrium. That means we would like to find all of equilibrium between the all of equilibrium among the goods market and money market together. So again, in order to drive LM curve is not very simple. If you check the left-hand side, increase in the income. So that means we would like to switch it, or we would like to change this, the income level. Y goes up. Y goes up means demand for money will be increased. That's why we'll have a shift to the right. But unfortunately or fortunately, our money supply is fixed, because at the beginning, since it is a short run, we have a fixed the price. And then same fashion, in the short run, our money supply is an exogenous variable controlled by central bank. That's why we'll have a vertical line. In other words, even if we have a higher income, but we'll have this mismatch will be just adjusted by higher interest rate. There's a rising interest rate. That means when you have a higher income and higher interest rate. So always in this case, we have some change. That means this is a shifting factor of this liquidity or the money demand. And then after that, we have a new equilibrium by adjustments of real interest rate. Looks like the process is opposite or inverse, because the usual case you can say price change and something respond in terms of microeconomics. But again, when you define demand curve, sometimes you can change it reverse. In other words, we'll find change in quantity first, and then there is a response of a price. Same fashion in this case. That's why it is a slightly different from the functional idea, because we will have a just a relation. So our national income or the income goes up, it will encourage or it will change our money demand shift outward. And then this is a market for real money balance. There is an adjustment of this interest rate. And then if you follow these 2 points, we can find initial equilibrium between R1 and Y1. And then we have a Y2, and now we have R2. That's why sometimes, even if this is not about our class, the main idea. So when you talk about price and quantity, so initial question, why we place this price variable on the vertical axis and quantity variable on the horizontal axis? Because we believe our demand function, the cause will be price, respond or effect will be quantity, independent and dependent. But in terms of in the system of a mathematical functional idea, horizontal axis should be x-axis or independent variable, and vertical axis will be y-axis or dependent variable. But we can explain this, for example, downward sloping of a demand curve as is the same as willingness to pay. That means when you consume more quantity, what happened to your willingness to pay? You would like to pay less because you feel your marginal benefit will be decreasing. If it is, even if we have initially the price to quantity relation, but like this mathematical plane idea, we can find the process from quantity to price. That means vice versa. If it is true, or if we deal with these two different approaches together, maybe sometimes just the relation will be better than just a functional ID. This is just a side note. And then after having this LM curve, very easily, when you change this national income or the income level, go up, go down, you will find several points around with this LM curve. That's why simply you can find this LM curve. After that, as you know, when you have something change in the exogenous variable, it will shift to LM curve toward the outward or the inward, something like that. So again, after having IS relation, we have to deal with the position of IS curve. Depends on policy variable. Again, even if we can exercise the many different variable, the change, but main idea is macroeconomics case always after having equilibrium, we have to think about policy variable, because the idea behind this model is how to control or how to understand this system of aggregate economy, not just a simple mathematical exercise. That's why we'll check what happened to our LM curve when you have some change in your shifting factor or policy variable. Here, in this case, money supply. So again, as you know, money supply in the system was fixed. And it means this is just discrete. So based on the proposal of the Fed, they would like to choose different level of money supply. So based on their the policy target or policy goal. For example, yesterday I watched one news article about there is a meeting between the chairman of a Department of Finance. I'm not sure about their actual name, the full name, and the chair of Bank of Korea. And then they met for dealing with how to control this skyrocketing this price level. That means after that, the chairman of Bank of Korea, he announced maybe we have to think about the higher interest rate, or sometimes he just mentioned we just exclude the possibility of a 0.5% change for inflation, the interest rate to regulate inflation. But due to severe problem of this inflation, the domestic and the international market, he just said maybe we cannot exclude this possibility of a big step of a change of interest rate. That means in this case, they would like, to make a higher interest rate, even if we'll deal with that in chapter 12, they would like to control money supply, not directly the interest, even if they announce nominal interest rate, but to make it out, they have to control money supply. That means in this case, to increase higher, or to have a higher inflation rate, in other words, the interest rate, sorry about that, interest rate, they have to decrease the contractionary monetary policy. So we'll have a drop, or the discrete drop in the money supply, we'll have a higher the interest rate. In other words, in this case, we don't have any change in the income or output level, but we have to achieve higher interest rate. How to do that? That means simply we have to shift up or shift to the left. But again, if you, in order to highlight our actual the reaction or the actual the process, maybe shift up is better than just a shift to the left. So we can see with the given output level or income level, we have to get higher the interest rate. That's why LM curve shift up or shift to the left, or same meaning. That means we'll find the relationship between the changes in the money supply and what happened to your LM curve. The opposite case is just very simple. Higher increase in money supply, your LM curve shift to the right in this case. Well, actually, the shift down, same meaning. Now, after driving or after understanding the operation of the very simple IS and LM curve, we'll just put them together. Again, mathematically, there is no problem because they share same the vertical axis and horizontal axis, the real interest rate and what is it? The national income or output. So we'll put them together. That means this is the meaning of this ISLM curve. Simultaneously, this is important. Again, initially IS curve means looks like the several different point of equilibrium point. So several combination of equilibrium point in goods market. And then LM curve, all of point on LM curve is also several equilibrium point in the money market. And then when we put them together, that means simultaneously we'll achieve equilibrium point in the both in goods market and money market. That means we make a connection between real sector. And then this is a money sector, or in general, we can say this looks like a nominal sector. Just to think about the big picture under the classical economics. They believe there is no specific connection between money market and goods market, even if they can make a connection in terms of the quantity theory of money. But again, their money market looks like the side. They would like to more focus on the goods market. And then their goods market change or the national output, another indicator of this real sector will be only controlled by production function and the level of capital and labor. And then they believe specific policies such as monetary policy will not make any change in your real sector. But actually, even if they presuppose it could be just the event in the long run, but when you turn to Keynesian economics, totally different. They would like to make a balance between goods market and the money market. And then, more fundamentally, they believe in the short run, or because the short run looks like another representative of sticky price. In other words, in the long run, by definition, we will not have any sticky prices. So in the short run, or when you have in the existence of a sticky or the rigid price, some policy variable or the many policy variable will make some change in your real sector, even policy from monetary sector or the nominal sector. That means Keynesian economics, in the world of Keynesian economics, there is no classical dichotomy. That's why they are fundamentally different. But nowadays, again, in terms of a macroeconomics world, in terms of just the textbook case, many professors or authors, they would like to make a balance. Okay, in the short run, maybe we guess the Keynesian's approach is better than classical economics, because in the short run, we experience there is some change in your real output. But in the long run, anyway, from this, for example, the inflation or some adjustment process, actual policy effect will be disappeared. That's why it looks like classical economics explain better than Keynesian economics in the long run. Now, that means it looks like some harmony between the classical economics and the Keynesian economics. But again, actually in the upper level of class or the master level or the PhD level, there is no harmony between them. They are totally different ideas. But again, since our class is just the most of the students are second year, and this is after having the principles class, we can just think or consider this type of approach means, okay, in the short run, the Keynesian economics looks like prevail the basic explanation. And in the long run, we have looks like the classical economics idea is a more looks like the more dominant in this world. And then we would like to find the connection between them. So that's why in chapter 12, we would like to see what is the actual what is the transition between this the short run and long run from in the point of the process of adjustment. So that means we'll just relax. At the beginning, our price will be sticky, but since when you relax our just the what is it, time horizon, not even if it is not the actual time, the period, so we'll have some the flexibility of price. In other words, it will be adjusted in the long run. In other words, in the middle of a process, we'll have some the positive or negative, some change in your real sector, but we'll back to origin in the long run. So this is a general or the relationship between short run and long. Okay, and then hold on a second. So last page is just a process. So again, the role of chapter 11 is we would like to make a connection between initial basic idea of ADAS model in chapter 10. But again, in chapter 10, our AD curve was or ADAS curve was from the extreme or the very simple the identities. That's why we would like to find a more reasonable approach of this ADAS. So as a first step, so we would like to find AD curve in terms of IS-LM relation. That means combining this goods market and the money market will create AD curve. And then this AD curve include some idea of Keynesian idea. For example, in terms of a percentage, is more than the classical economics, but there is some adjustment between Keynesian economics and classical economics. And then it will prevail basic operation of short run in terms of this IS and LM. So that's why IS and even if the LM is also theory of liquidity preference, but again, one of them will be just we would like to ignore the relationship between the Fisher equation, that means nominal interest rate, real, and expected inflation. After that, that means we'll just make some technical, some additional assumption. Nominal and real interest rate will be the same. After that, we can combine into ISLM model. And based on this ISLM model will be based on main determinant is main player is a real interest rate and Y because P's are fixed. But we would like to relax the level of P into this looks like a fixed or exogenous variable, but we would like to change the role of price into just a flexible. That means we'll find relationship between price and output. That means we'll switch this as a variable into entire level of the price level. And then we'll construct this AD curve. And then we have short run case, long run case together. In other words, this AD curve contain ISLM. And then this IS, we have a fiscal policy. And then this is also monetary policy. In other words, we can contain we'll consider some policy factors from this AD curve. That means when you have some change, they are the component of the policy, in particular from the fiscal or monetary policy, it will influence operation of AD curve. And then AS is another different side. Also, still same thing. It was from production. But again, that means in terms of the Keynesian economics, they would like to more focus on or emphasize more of this aggregate demand. But if it is a classical economics, final closure, we call it the closure. But how to make the finalized our outcome, it will be determined by the supply side. But the relationship will be covered by this AD-AS curve with the additional assumption of short run and long run, sticky price and flexible price. That means we can deal with all of the two different approaches into one model. So ISLM go to aggregate demand. After that, we'll consider aggregate supply curve together. Now we'll have a AD-AS model. That means we'll back to chapter 10. And then That means this model will be used for Shortland fluctuation because by nature, we assume prices are sticky. So this is general the approach or the general the connection between the chapter 10, chapter 11, and chapter 12. Okay, now we'll start with chapter 12. Okay, after class, I'll post this file. Sorry about that. Okay, any questions? Okay. Okay, first of all, chapter 12. If you check just the title of chapter 12, it is a application. So we would like to play with this the aggregate demand, but actually this applying the ISLM. That means in this case we have to know the slide with this ISLM. So at the beginning we have to create aggregate demand. That means this is we have to cover in chapter 12. Sorry. So chapter 12, again, in chapter 10, we talked about what is the aggregate demand and supply with the limited assumptions. And chapter 11, we developed ISLM. That means we consider the goods market and money market together with the assumptions of Keynesian cross and the theory of liquidity preference. And it will be used for aggregate demand. Now, this chapter will use ISLM to Shortland effect of fiscal policy and monetary policy. Again, since it is about the basic relation in the the goods market and money market, and they are all include policy variables. That's why we'll apply what happened to our output and real interest rate. When you have some change in your policy variable, fiscal policy and monetary policy. And by nature, these are all based on sticky price or the Shortland case. That means we'll find the fluctuation of the economic output. And then since it is the inside the ISLM model, we'll find what happened to your real interest rate and output together. After that, with this ISLM model, we'll drive aggregate demand. And then with this aggregate demand based on the relationship between ISLM and aggregate demand, we'll find operation of this aggregate demand. In other words, when you have some change in your IS or LM, it will cause your aggregate demand to change. So that's why we'll make a relationship. So key point is, so we'll use this ISLM model to analyze this type of approach. Again, since it is a macroeconomics, we would like to understand. So there are some Shortland fluctuation, how to model in our economic setting. After that, okay, how to deal with or how to control this type of fluctuation or how to make some fluctuations with a policy variable. That means this ISLM model or aggregate demand and supply model looks like some type of experiment. Looks like even if it's not the natural science experiment, it looks like we have some experiment with some very simple or not just a simple, but looks like a simple just the ISLM system or aggregate demand and aggregate supply system. That's why in chapter 12, if you open the book, they provided many different case studies with the actual the data. So that means still, to apply this ADAS model with the actual reality, we have to collect the data and then we have to see what is the effectiveness of this model. So maybe if you major in economics, maybe you will have another chance to take the econometrics class. Then some of the econometrics class, they covered some actual the macroeconomics model into their process. Hold on a second. There is. Yes, as I said, I didn't post this file yet because today we'll just cover just the basic bridge. So that's why after class I'll post this file. So don't worry about it. Because I didn't decide. Because the what is it? 12.3 is about Great Depression. That means that the author Gregory Mankiw he allocated a lot of pages for explanation of Great Depression. But actually, in order to explain Great Depression, there are first of all there are some conflicts. In other words, monetary economics or classical economics or the Keynesian economics, they all have a totally different explanation for Great Depression, the cause of Great Depression and cure of Great Depression. And then Gregory Mankiw also took his own position. And then I have my own position. That's why I didn't decide, is it required or useful for your understanding, because we have some those looks like the mixture between them. So that's why in chapter 12, first of all, I just contain just the technical part. That means how to drive ISA aggregate demand curve from ISLM model, and then what is the basic operation for analyzing this policy effect. After that, I guess if we have more time, we'll discuss or I will explain some idea behind this Great Depression or other economic happening or event. So in any case, after class, I posted the file. Don't worry about it. So we'll drive. So you have to understand how to drive aggregate demand from this ISLM model. Okay, we'll start from equilibrium. Previously, we saw this type of looks like downward sloping of IS relation and upward sloping of LM relation. Again, they are all equilibrium in the goods market and equilibrium in the money market. And then this is exactly the same. So simultaneously, this model satisfies equilibrium condition in both markets. Now, so we would like to analyze this fiscal policy and monetary policy. I'm sure you know, fiscal policy means we'll have some changes in government expenditure or purchase or tax. And then monetary policy means we'll change money supply. So again, as you know, technically, when you have some change in your fiscal policy, it means it is associated with IS, because they are all component of IS relation. But when you have some change in your money supply, it is about LM. What about IS? Not relevant. Okay, because they are not, this money supply is not component of IS curve. That's why ISLM initially looks like the two distinct market. This is the money market and this is a goods market, but they share same variable, R and Y. That's why you can make some channel between them. But the government authorities, when they exercise their own policy in terms of a fiscal policy, so technically we can say it will make an impact on IS curve first. Then since they are all in the same plane, some change in IS curve means they will have some change in the common factor, real interest rate and output. Same fashion, similarly, so we'll have some change in money supply. If it is, we'll have some change in your real interest rate and output together. Okay, now, okay, this is the starting point. As you know, a fiscal policy means when you have an increase in G and decrease in T, they are all same expansionary. If it is, regardless of original source and regardless of the size of this change, because as you know, we already covered this, the distance will be measured by the multipliers. And we know, since we have two different source, government purchase and tax multiplier, their size is slightly different. Actually, this is slightly larger than tax. And then we'll have some change. So IS curve will shift because when you have some change in government purchase or decrease in tax, we don't have any change in real interest rate initially. That's why we'll have some increase this amount. But in the LM, since it is a LM, the money market, IS shift means output goes up. So that's why there is a response or additional feedback in the money market in terms of money demand. That's why actual change is not just A to this point. We have only A to B. And that means there is some adjustment of the real interest rate. That means it will be controlled by LM curve, inside the LM curve or the money market. Same fashion, when you have some change in tax, in particular tax cut, we'll have some change at given real interest rate. But in this case, we'll have looks like actual process will be, there is some adjustment because our real interest rate will be adjusted in the money market. That's why we'll achieve point B. But regardless of this process or the original source, when you have an expansionary fiscal policy, our IS curve will shift to right. So this is a technical finding. Now, monetary policy case, same fashion. When you have a money supply goes up, what happened to our ISLM? Again, first of all, when you have some change in money supply, it is one part of real money balance, and then initially it is a fixed, and this is a fixed. And we have a liquidity. So that's why your LM curve at given real interest rate, we have to get higher output. That's why our LM curve will shift downward, something like that. So that means we can find what is the operation of a fiscal policy and monetary policy. In particular, in this case, expansionary fiscal policy and expansionary monetary policy. You can easily extend it into the contractionary fiscal policy and contractionary monetary policy. In other words, G increase, T decrease means IS curve shift to the right. Or more, shift to more. For example, in this case, you can say shift to the right. And LM curve case, when you have some change in money supply, higher money supply means LM curve. In this case, looks like a shift down, because if you stick to change in the direction of real interest rate, or shift down. But sometimes you can say shift to the right, the same meaning. In this case, if you say the down, that means at given output level, you will just change it the direction of real interest rate. But shift to the right means at given interest rate, what happened to your national income? That's why we'll have a same result. Okay, here. Okay, I already a little bit mentioned before. So usual case, the monetary and fiscal policy variable is exogenous. And usually, again, the chairman of the Bank of Korea, he said he would like to take some additional action for regulating or controlling higher inflation. And then he mentioned interest rate. But again, in reality, usual case, why don't you start with just change in your interest rate? Or in this system, we assumed nominal interest rate will be same as real interest rate, because we assume the expected inflation is just negligible, what we just assume constant. If it is just maybe simple idea is okay, from now on we'll raise the nominal interest rate or real interest rate into more some percentage point. But actually in reality, usually Bank of Korea, they would like to achieve some target interest rate by controlling or adjusting money supply. That's why still we can reconcile these two different approaches together. After that, so another one is we'll find some interaction between them. That means when they take some action on monetary policy, there is could be some countermeasure. Or when they start with a fiscal policy, there is another countermeasure of monetary policy. That means this is not only one-time change. There is looks like tiki-taka or just some interaction between them. So we have to think about what happened to the interaction between monetary and fiscal policy. So in the book, in the textbook, he chose 3 different cases. For example, initial starting point was the Fed's response to government purchase. That means Congress, the Parliament enact what they just announced will spend additional money to deal with, for example, COVID-19. That's why increase in G. After that, that means we will have some change in your IS curve. We expect, and then, for example, IS and LM, IS curve will shift to the right. What? If it is, we'll have a higher income. Higher income will affect money market. That's why we'll have a higher income. That means we'll have a real interest rate goes up. So that's why maybe we can imagine there are some the countermeasure or the response of Feds together. That means this is looks like the main the main agent, main actor for monetary policy. They will have the different objective or purpose. And then he categorized 3 different cases. Hold money supply, sorry, it should be the different one. Hold money supply constant and, for example, interest rate constant and the national income constant. Based on their purpose, their response will be different. That means we'll deal with these 3 different cases. Here, first of all, their proposal is we would like to control our money supply constant. And then here, initially they made tax cut. That means tax increase shift to the IS curve to the left. That means this is a change in tax is a positive. So looks like an unfavorable condition for IS relation. So we'll have some change. After that, but the Fed, check this out. This is out. But the Fed, because Feds hold the money supply constant, LM curve stay the same. That means since they didn't have any change in your LM curve, that means even if we have a lower national income, we are just suffering from lower the income due to higher tax. That means there is no action because their goal is to make their money supply constant. What about different case? Okay, real interest rate constant means here, if we just technically compare previous figure and this figure, there is a countermeasure. In other words, initially tax increase, same fashion. That means a starting point will be the same. So initially A, and then we'll have a tax cut, a tax increase in tax, IS curve to the left. So previous case, since their goal was to make their money supply constant, they didn't take any action here. They didn't take any action, but now they would like to maintain same level of real interest rate. If they didn't take any action, they will end in this point. That means lower interest rate, but they would like to maintain same level of real interest rate. That's why it requires some additional action or additional response of monetary authorities. They have to make their money supply LM curve shift to the left to maintain this point B. That means we'll have a more lower the output level. So that's why based on these 2 different proposed, the behavior of LM or the operation of a money market controlled by monetary authorities will be different. What if we have a different case? For example, even if it's not this, actually sometimes employment or unemployment problem will be covered by usual case in South Korea, covered by the government. And then even if the Bank of Korea is also looks like the one independent branch of government, but actually they should be the independent. But usual case purpose of a Bank of Korea or the central bank in South Korea is they would like to control inflation. But now many countries, many central banks, they would like to intervene the market to control unemployment problem. That means they would like to set up new proposal or new target. For example, they would like to make, they didn't want any change in our output level, because output level is associated with unemployment. If it is, initially we have some adverse effect on the IS curve. That means we'll have a low output first. But again, the Fed or the central bank would like to maintain same level of outcome or output or same level of looks like employment. If it is, they have to take active action or expansionary policy to maintain or to recover this output level. So nowadays, many countries, the central bank would like to take this type of actions. But again, in this case, technically we can categorize. When you have some change in IS curve, there is three types of response. The one is the LM curve. Since it is LM curve, no action, or the LM curve shift to the left, or LM curve shift to the right. Again, usual case, since we apply the graphical approaches with a very limited assumptions, since we have only two-dimensional plane with the two different lines, one line will lead to the response of another line, and then with a specific goal of two variables, we'll have a different operations. So we can very quickly or easily categorize their behavior, regardless of any background. Okay, I guess now is almost done. So that's why today I will stop here. But again, if you didn't receive your exam paper back, just let me know by your email. Then I will reply via email too with the attachment. And then this Thursday again, this Thursday we'll complete this chapter 12, and then I will post new assignment questions. Then maybe you will have some take practice with the operation of this ISLM model. But actually, I don't like this type of approaches. But sometimes in order to fully understand this process, you have to draw the many different level of different type of graphs together, and then maybe some part of exam question will be from this chapter 10 to 12 too. That means starting point is we have to understand the Sholem fluctuation with the system of ISLM and aggregate demand, and maybe we'll back to aggregate supply with the new chapter 14 later. Okay, any questions? All right. If we didn't have any more questions, so we'll stop here and we'll resume the rest of chapter 12 on Thursday. Okay. Thank you.